Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. We are broadcasting live from Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum, where it's been a fairly momentous day. The focus of the world has been on Donald Trump and what he's had to say about Greenland, and what he's had to say about the equation between America and Europe. And it is a real crisis. Today, I would suggest that perhaps Donald Trump took one step back when it comes to Greenland. He didn't say that there would be military force required or used by the Americans to annex Greenland, but he hasn't given up his claims on Greenland at all. He says it's essential for America's defense. He also says that when it comes to America's NATO partners, America has done a great deal for NATO, and it's time for NATO to pay back. Let's take a look at some of the key sound bites of Donald Trump before we get more specifics.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States. It's the United States alone that can protect this giant mass of land, this giant piece of ice, develop it and improve it and make it so that it's good for Europe and safe for Europe and good for us. We need it for strategic national security and international security.
And I think in specifics, what Donald Trump did say about the use of force, and that really is that red line which one would hope is never crossed. His exact words were, "I won't use excessive force. I don't have to. I don't want to. All the US is asking for is a place called Greenland." But let's listen in with more detail on just what he had to say on the Greenland issue.
Greenland is a vast, almost entirely uninhabited and undeveloped territory, sitting undefended in a key strategic location between the United States, Russia, and China. That's exactly where it is, right smack in the middle. Wasn't important nearly when we gave it back. You know, when we gave it back, it wasn't the same as it is now. And this, to get to this rare earth, you got to go through hundreds of feet of ice. That's not the reason we need it. We need it for strategic national security and international security.
Well, Donald Trump also spoke about or described Greenland as being one big piece of ice and spelled out many more reasons besides the one that you just heard on why America requires Greenland, why in fact America is demanding it.
In World War II, when Denmark fell to Germany and was totally unable to defend either itself or Greenland, so the United States was then compelled, we did it, we felt an obligation to do it, to send our own forces to hold the Greenland territory. We literally set up bases on Greenland for Denmark. We fought for Denmark. We weren't fighting for anyone else. We were fighting to save it for Denmark. Big, beautiful piece of ice. It's hard to call it land. It's a big piece of ice. But we saved Greenland and successfully prevented our enemies from gaining a foothold in our hemisphere. So we did it for ourselves also. And then after the war, which we won, after the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that?
So the big question, therefore, is how exactly does Donald Trump intend to take over Greenland? Will there be negotiations with Denmark? Will there be a purchase price? Remember, people on the ground in Greenland, they don't want to be American at all. So it is a huge divide, particularly since leaders in Canada and in Canada and certainly in Europe have made it absolutely clear that the sovereignty of Greenland and Denmark must remain intact. Any change to that is a threat to NATO itself, and that they will not be bullied. So that's what they've said. How exactly does Donald Trump intend to go about it from this stage onwards? Listen in.
It's the United States alone that can protect this giant mass of land, this giant piece of ice, develop it and improve it and make it so that it's good for Europe and safe for Europe and good for us. And that's the reason I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States. just as we have acquired many other territories throughout our history, as many of the European nations have. They've acquired. There's nothing wrong with it.
And the big concern, of course, is the use of force. Is that going to happen at all? What exactly did Trump say? Now, remember, he's not ruled out the use of force, but he did seem to climb down a little bit from his rather extreme positions over the last few days.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay? Now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
So that is extremely welcome news. There will not be violence on Greenland, but there will be an active American effort to try and get it one way or the other. But earlier on today, I also spoke to Bill Gates, who was here with us. We spoke about several issues. And in this exclusive interview with NDTV, besides talking about the work being done by the Gates Foundation in India, he did also reflect on the state of uncertainty in the world today.
I'm helping Europe, I'm helping NATO, and I've until the last few days when I told them about Iceland, they loved me. They called me daddy, right, last time. A very smart man said, he's our daddy. He's running it. I was like running it. I went from running it to being a terrible human being. But now what I'm asking for is a piece of ice, cold and poorly located, that can play a vital role in world peace and world protection. It's a very small ask compared to what we have given them for many, many decades. But the problem with NATO is that we'll be there for them 100%. But I'm not sure that they'd be there for us.
In fact, that was Donald Trump. But let's listen in now to what Bill Gates has had to say. You're here in Davos at a time which is very uncomfortable, some would say. Some would say it's unpredictable. Your focus has been on health, development, education, and yet it seems that the world around us is focusing on geopolitical tensions. Is that a concern for you?
Well, absolutely. The world does best when we get along, share with each other, trade with each other. There's always been a bit of tension, but we've avoided using nuclear weapons. Typically trade has gone up for mutual benefit. Whenever we have innovation, no matter what country it comes from, the whole world benefits. So, the turmoil in the world is a concern to me, but I'm still optimistic that the innovation and the fact that people will support and care for each other, that we'll get through what is far more tumultuous time than I thought it would be.
Is this the most tumultuous time for you in all your decades in observing the world around? Is this perhaps the most tense Davos?
The only other time I'd say is comparable was in the 1960s. You had the Vietnam War, protests, you had unrest in American cities, you had political assassinations, and it really felt like a very tough time. We did get through that. The U.S., came out of that as a stronger country. And so I'm hopeful that how we value alliances and we behave in a predictable way, have win-win relationships. I hope that, out of this tumultuous period, we learn that that's best for everyone.
Yeah. Well, among the many great economists who've been present here at the World Economic Forum is Geeta Gopinath. She's no longer with the International Monetary Fund. She's back teaching at this stage in the United States. Let's listen in to her interpretation of what the tension that we're now seeing means for countries around the world. Is India a haven of stability in this present unpredictability all around us?
India is certainly doing well. I mean, its growth rate is supposed to be 7.3%.
Yeah, it's gone up. It's been revised upwards. Yeah,
exactly, by the IMF. I think that's very good. It's benefiting also from ongoing reforms in the country. Good weather, the monsoons help always with rural consumption. So I think that is certain. But India is not completely insulated from events that are happening externally. The tariffs that are now one of the highest being put on India right now, India's been able to divert a bunch of goods to other countries. That's not going to be, you cannot keep doing that for a very long time. So hopefully there will be a trade deal with the US too.
Yeah.
But to the extent that India has a very large domestic market, that helps insulate it to some extent.
What about the big trade deal that we're getting with Europe quite soon? How is that significant for the Indian economy and the way forward, particularly since with America it's not yet happened?
I think it's very meaningful on multiple levels, right? One is that what you see is many countries kind of following up and saying, okay, let's get the deal done after having worked on it for years and years and years, nothing having happened. So the European Union went and closed their trade deal with South America, Mercosur, which has been in the making for multiple years. And despite the fact that several of its members are still pushing back, it said, no, we have to get it done. So in that spirit, I think the European Union and India having a trade deal would also be a very strong signal of economic cooperation, of new alliances. And that's a sense in which this time is different from the 1920s and 30s, when you had, the Great Depression and everything that followed, was because at that time, every country was just retaliating with tariffs against each other across the board. This time, it seems that countries say, no, we really can benefit from a predictable trading system. Yeah. So even if the US at this point doesn't want to play that game, the rest of us do.
Well, there have been several reactions from, including leading American political leaders on the Donald Trump issue. And what this really implies, not just for the United States, but for countries around the world, and whether anything needs to be done to perhaps see to it that some of the goals or the demands of Donald Trump are dealt with effectively without necessarily impacting relations of countries and blocs around the world.
Everyone,
Governor, would you say that was an empty threat then?
That was never a real threat.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you.
Well, there's some breaking news now coming in. What we can confirm is, and this was a real concern, that the European Union would in fact break a proposed trade deal between the United States and countries in Europe. And it now does appear that that is taking place as a result of the damage which has been created, the rift which now exists between America and Europe. The EU has frozen a trade deal with the United States. That's a huge step and certainly adds to the deterioration of ties between America and some of its closest partners.
Certain places in Europe are not even recognizable, frankly, anymore. They're not recognizable. And we can argue about it, but there's no argument. Friends come back from different places. I don't want to insult anybody and say I don't recognize it. And that's not in a positive way, it's in a very negative way. And I love Europe and I want to see Europe go good, but it's not heading in the right direction.
All right, well, among those who've been over here, Martin Wolf, one of the world's finest economic commentators. He's talking about sanctions, he's talking about trade, he's talking about the equations between America and its European partners. Let's listen in to what he told our editor-in-chief, Rahul Kawal.
Your hot take on what you just heard from the American president?
Well, to me, the only interesting thing that I heard was the statement that he didn't intend to take Greenland by force, which is quite significant because it was discussed. Otherwise, I don't feel, apart from he was rude, he made a lot of stuff up. He repeated how completely transformative he's been, how ungrateful the Europeans are. It's all familiar. So, and he went over, and so most of it was familiar stuff. But that comment on Greenland struck me as new and important.
Do you think he intends to hold on to this demand for ownership of Greenland? Is he just, he's a New York land broker. Is he just negotiating, drawing, like, is it like the anchor position that he's taken to wear the Europeans down?
One of the things I've learned is never to work out what he really means. Obviously, everything he says is to some degree negotiable. He doesn't want World War III. No, he generally doesn't. At the same time, he might really, really, really want this. So the question you're really asking is how far is he prepared to go? And what would the Europeans have to give him to make him go away? And I don't know. The honest truth is I don't know. But it's pretty clear to me that this Don Roe doctrine thing of his and his particular mania about the North of North America and the Arctic, that's real to him. If someone gets a sense of this, it matters to him. So I don't think he will give up easily.
Why do you think it matters to him so much? Because you study economics so closely. Is there anything there in Greenland that you think makes it worth this one?
I genuinely don't understand it. I don't think it's got anything to do with natural resources. Somebody has convinced him that the great new competition in the world that matters to America is over the Arctic, particularly against China, and Greenland is a crucial asset in that great conflict. Who has persuaded him this, I don't know. Most people in America don't seem to agree at all, including security people. But he also feels it's a wonderful, great big piece of real estate, and he would like to go down. I think this is plausible. As the man who got an even bigger chunk of the world, at least in territory, than Thomas Jefferson with the Louisiana Purchase, because it's so big. And that's just pure megalomania. I mean, part of it is pretty obvious if you look at what he's doing, that he wants to do big, splashy things that will be identified with him. So he can call it Trump Greenland.
What did you make of Donald Trump's address at Davos?
Well, it was quite astonishing how excited and fascinated, one European executive told me, this feels like a zoological experience. This is
Zoological experience.
yeah, there's Trump is a real character in the Western imagination, in the European imagination, in the global imagination. And I think the people saw what Americans see on a weekly basis, which is a president who is has his talking points, has his script. He sort of beat the same drums as he usually beats. And I think the one bit of news they were looking for was his line about Greenland and not choosing to use force. But he still left a certain amount of grievance on the table. I think the broader trend lines that we're seeing here in Davos is one of a genuine rupture, whether it is in transatlantic ties or in the ways in which governments and those of us involved in thinking about foreign policy and international politics, see the global order. I think there is a genuine moment here where for many years we've been talking about how the world is changing, the rules-based order is eroding, collapsing, and now I think we're here at that moment of rupture. And Trump.
How do you think Europe reacts to this? You've been in several of these halls where many of the European leaders spoke. What's your impression?
I don't think he's a completely unknown quantity at this point, but when you're sitting in these rooms with various people from around the world, including a lot of Europeans, there's a lot of disbelief at some of the way he talks. There's a lot of laughter about some of his turns of phrase. But
the Europeans are not the ones laughing. It's the ones who are from other countries. They are
I think there's a certain moment where what else can you do but laugh, So I think I wouldn't discount that.
What did you make of Donald Trump laid out in Washington and Washington?
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. I'm going to leave it to Ishwar to kind of decode what this means for the moment. But let me just say, as an Indian American, what I think this means for India. I actually think now the rebel lines or the red lines have been drawn very clearly. And the countries that are going to emerge from this stronger are the ones which focus on the factors that are under their control rather than worry about, issues which are out of their control. America is out of their control. Trump is out of their control. Issues around globalization and tariff are out of their control. What's in our control is to make our economy really, really strong. How do we do that? I think we know the route to that very well. It's through labor reform, it's through land reforms, it's through making the ease of doing business in India really, really effective. And we've got to really cut out the noise out of it. The second thing I will say this, with all humility, I think when Prime Minister Modi pushed back and refused to do that deal on the terms that everybody was saying it should be, even if you remember your interview with Fareed Zakaria, like the point was, what's the wrong thing? Do the deal, say whatever needs to be said. And I think history will show that, perhaps Prime Minister Modi and India were right in not doing it. Because the people who did all of this, whether it was UK and others, what did they get? They bought 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of time before that deal was thrown into the garbage and they were threatened with more tariffs. On the other hand, India has its dignity intact. India has the chips right. And I think we should really capitalize now on the movement, whether it is through trade treaties with other countries, whether it is about getting our own house in order. And if we can do that, that's what we should focus on and cut the rest out as noise.
Say Ishwar Prasad, the world's leading economist, and I'm very curious to think not just about what he said about business and economy, but geopolitics and geopolitics. What do you see
This is a very important moment because I think it does suggest a significant rupture in the international order, which the United States had set up to a large extent. And in particular, it is striking that we are seeing the rupture in what has been a very long-standing and very solid, rock-solid alliance on the military, economic and geopolitical fronts. So the West is sort of splintering. And the speech that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, gave yesterday provided the rest of the world's perspective on this issue. While today, I think we heard a very clear statement from Trump about the American perspective on this issue, which is largely to go it alone, and countries that are going to be in the American sphere of influence are those that buy in completely into the Trump vision of the world.
Nobody seems to be buying in completely, whether it's God or a British president, and it's not a big thing.
That's absolutely true. And Trump seems fine with that. The other interesting development, of course, is that China is keen to take on the mantle of being the protector of the multilateral rules-based order. Now, the question is whether it is able to take the ground that the US has ceded. And there are certainly some countries that will see this as an opportunity to get into a closer embrace with China. But I think the reality, as Professor Dhaliwal correctly pointed out, is that every country is to a large extent going to be on its own because they caught between these two very unsavory extremes, neither of which is very appealing, and nobody wants to get into a very close embrace with the US right now because it is seen as an untrustworthy ally, and nobody quite trusts China as well. So in a sense, it is going to be up to every country to ensure the resilience of its own economic policies and of its policy-making structure.
On Greenland, do you think he's negotiating, or is this really what he wants and he won't stop with anything less than actual ownership of Greenland?
It's hard to tell. It was sort of encouraging that he said that he will not employ force, but I think there was an implicit threat in there that if the NATO countries don't come around and see to his vision of the US controlling Greenland, there is going to be some ugliness ahead. It's not clear what form this ugliness will take. It will probably start with tariffs. I hope that reason will prevail and that there will be no military action of any sort. But with Trump, you cannot count out anything.
Well, there you have it, all of the details on what has been a remarkable day in Davos, perhaps the most tense, perhaps the most anticipated in decades of the World Economic Forum. Donald Trump has spoken, and it does appear to be a bit of a climb down. Will there be military action in Greenland by the United States? Perhaps not, at least not immediately. But what is the future of Greenland? Donald Trump is working a hard deal. Will the European nations accept it? For the moment, from all of us here, good night.